Good evening, my name is Jasmine Sue. I'm currently a student at UTSA, majoring in cybersecurity. I'm here with my family, including my aunt who is moderating the discussion. My mom is Iranian and my dad is Taiwanese, and I'm very proud of my heritage. I would like to introduce the president of the World Affairs Council, Armin Babajanian. Thank you.
You know someone's Iranian when they say Baba Janyan. So thank you so much, Jasmine. How's everybody doing? Thank you all for being here for this really special evening with some really special guests who are going to talk about a topic that is relatively a serious topic, but with a lot of anecdotes on culture, but all policy and also current events. I know it's going to be very engaging and a very positive discussion. So I'm going to make a few remarks and recognize some individuals and let them go at it because you really don't want to hear from me. Again, thank you to Jasmine, who is a student at UTSA. And, you know, we have we're a member-driven organization, like a lot of other organizations in town who rely on memberships like the Rotary Club, YMCA and whatnot. We have a new membership level, which is the junior membership. So these are youth who are under 18 that we're trying to capture, and it all started because we started seeing so many little ones coming who were true, they were being dragged to the events, but they were also engaged and listening. And so we started the junior membership program. More coming about that in the coming months. So on behalf of my team, Miranda, Clarissa, who are floating around the room, and our interns, Ashley and Megan, I want to welcome you all to our event on U.S.-Iran relations. We have started doing many programs here at the Center Club because of our wonderful partnership with our former board member, Chad Taylor, who was the really tall guy checking the mics earlier. I think he stepped out of the room. But he used to be on the World Affairs Council board, and he has gifted us a membership to the Center Club so that we can utilize the venue, and so you'll start seeing us having more programs here. So thank you, Chad. He has offered, this is a private club, after the program, if you wanted to have dinner or a drink at the bar and beautiful view of the city, you're welcome to stay and enjoy a cocktail at the bar or have dinner. Just let the Kimberly at the front know. So thank you for that, Chad. You heard from music from Sir Mad. I don't know if he's still here. Yes. Thank you, Sir Mad. Appreciate it. Kurdish, Turkish influence there. Appreciate. What's that?
Persian, Turkish, Azeri, Kurdish, all together.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We also have one of our really important partners is the City of San Antonio, their Global Engagement Office, and Sherry is here, who you'll hear from, but Martha's also here. Thank you for being here. And some of you might remember we did a program with one of our guests, Sepehr, Haddad, who you meet shortly. It was a virtual program, but we held it also in person. It was right after the pandemic in 2021 is when Suha reminded me. We partnered with Musical Bridges around the world and had a wonderful program on Sepehr's first book, which a phenomenal book. Twig is here selling it. It's called 100 Sweet Promises. Highly recommended. I love it. It's not a ploy for you to buy the book. It's genuinely an amazing book of a story that Sepehr's grandmother told him about. It has everything from politics to culture to love and everything else intertwined, and I highly recommend that. And of course, his recent book, The Harmless Necessary Cat, which is also available with our friends from the Twig bookstore. I want to thank Hong Tao Jin and Helen. They are resident photographers. Thank you for volunteering his time. He comes to all of our events and they take pictures. He works for USAA and does this on the side. So thank you, Hong Tao, for doing this. Helen, thank you so much. And we will have those pictures sent to everyone who registered, as well as the video that will be available for you to post anywhere you'd like. So thank you for that. If you haven't tried, I think the baklava is all done because it was so good. But Kamran Haji Vandi, is he here? He's not here? He is the owner of several restaurants. One that is one of my favorites is Pasha. The one on Wurzbach and I-10 is my favorite. But he also provided the baklava from Baklava. So thank you to Kamran. If you go there, please thank him. Yes. Also want to recognize Judge Michael Mary, who's here. The Honorable Judge Mary, thank you for being here. And we have someone who may or may not be sticking around San Antonio. We shall see. We're going to try to, we may lock the doors tonight so that he's not going to leave. He's with the State Department. He does foreign affairs and a foreign policy advisor to the mayor, City of San Antonio, Tim Liston, with the Department of State. Thank you. We have a new partnership that just launched recently with the Harvard Business School Club of San Antonio and the Harvard Club of San Antonio. And Bob is here as a representative. Thank you to the Harvard Club. We look forward to growing that partnership. Thank you, Bob. Appreciate you for being here. And a few more points before I go enjoy a beverage myself is thanks to Mojgan and the San Antonio Persian Culture Society, the Mehr Foundation. We have been partners with them on many programs on U.S.-Iran relations, and then also their Persian Festival, which is phenomenal. And we always have an Armenia table. We have a World Affairs Council table there all the time. So the Mehr Foundation, if you want to learn more about the Persian community in San Antonio and how vibrant and energetic and impactful they are, talk to Mojgan. And I know several of their leadership is here. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Mojgan. You know, when I was at the World Affairs Council conference last year, we had one of our panelists, we have all these amazing speakers who come and speak on various global topics. And there was one person who stood out, and that was one of the guests, Dr. Kamran Bokhari, who we would meet in a few minutes. He spoke there, and I said, when we do a program on Iran, we're going to have to bring him. So thank you, Dr. Bokhari, for being here, and you will meet him. Yes. And Sepehr, my brother from another mother, is what I like to say. We have been talking for many years, since the Zoom program we had, to bring him to San Antonio. I appreciate you for being here. You're a great friend, and you have a gift for writing and also music. So I'm so glad that you and your lovely wife, Mona, it's their first time in San Antonio. So if you want to welcome them, give them a... Thank you so much, Heather. Appreciate you. This wouldn't happen without our supporters. Like I said, we have partners like the Global Engagement Office, including Sherry Dolat-Shahi, who is also a great friend of the World Affairs Council and ours. And this wouldn't happen without her support, without her guidance. And she and Dr. Richardson Gill, her husband, are also helping to sponsor this event. So thank you to Sherry and Dr. Gill. Lastly, before Sherry comes and says a few words, we have two exciting programs coming up. I'd rather mention it now than the end because we're going to all scatter. On October 29th, we're having a program with Catherine Nixon Cook and David Lesh. Catherine wrote a book called Dodgers to Damascus. Dr. Lesh is a Trinity professor who was a first draft pick for the LA Dodgers, but got injured, and now he's a professor. So if you want to hear more about that, they're going to be discussing the book and his life in great detail, and look forward to that. It's going to be held at Alamo Colleges. And then the one after that on November 6th, in this very room, we will have Henry Cisneros and Robert Rivard talking about the San Antonio mega region and everything that has to do with the economic ties and culture and everything in between for San Antonio and Austin. Without further ado, I want to bring up Sherry. Sherry is, this wouldn't happen without her, because she, and I don't want to steal her thunder of her relationship with Sepehr and how this all came about. Sherry is the Chief Diplomacy Officer at the City of San Antonio at the Global Engagement Office. She's the guru when it comes to global relations, our go-to for anything that we do. Please help me give a warm welcome to Sherry Gillette-Chapman.
Good evening, everyone. I cannot tell you how excited I am tonight, because the program tonight actually has a very personal meaning for me. And I'll get into that a little bit, but I cannot contain my excitement. So first of all, I want to say thank you to our men. I want to say thank you to the World Affairs Council, to all the staff at the World Affairs Council who have made this possible. Thank you to the Center Club, Chad Taylor. I know he's not in the room, but please do say thank you, our men, to Chad on our behalf for the partnership with the World Affairs Council. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from our panelists today. And our panelists have actually, I think they've come from the same side of the country, from the Washington, D.C. area, and they have traveled far to be here with us. Thank you for coming. And we look forward to the conversation, but I'm not finished. So I want to tell you, this is a personal story. First of all, I was born in Iran. My father was Iranian. My mother is still alive and she's English. My father is no longer with us. And I lived until the age of 14 in Iran. And so my background was very mixed. I was a of mixed descent, English, Iranian, growing up in Iran in my early life. I have to tell you, I had a very happy childhood. Just great experience, great school experiences. And we left Iran right before the revolution, 6 months before the revolution, and moved to England. And that's where I formalized my education. And I was in England until life brought me over this side of the ocean after university. Now, I have, from my father's side of the family, it's Magdolashai is my paternal name, but of course, like everyone, we have the maternal and the paternal sides of the family. And on my father's mother's side of the family, there's been this musical gene that has just gone through generations, except for my generation. I think it skipped me, my siblings. But a number of our family members and our predecessors were huge in the world of music, and that I had heard the stories. My father was a progeny, a lot of his cousins are, and that was from the Minbashian side of the family, which is my grandmother's side. So having grown up, having had connections with most of the closer family, I had never really had relationships with family further away. And in 2021, one of my father's cousins wrote to me. She lived in DC area, and she said, "Have you read the book that your cousin published?" And I had to say I didn't know who he was. And so I immediately bought the book on Amazon, devoured it, and realized, oh my God, this is all the stories that I would hear as a child from my father. And what I loved is that Sepehr took family history, but he fictionalized that story. So he told a story which is very much in words of fiction, but it's based on many real facts. And I just can't tell you how special it was reading this, again connecting it back to the past. And so of course, what did I do? I got onto Facebook, I tracked Sepehr down, I said, hey, I just read your book and I'm your cousin. Oh, I didn't know I was your cousin. Anyway, we connected, and unbeknownst to me, I actually had bought several of his CDs years before, because he is also a musician, Shahina Sepehr. And I had played that music and enjoyed it, you know, again, part of my music collection, completely unknowns to me. Anyway, and when I went to Washington, D.C. on a work trip, one night we connected, we had dinner, I met Mojgan, Sepehr for the first time, and it's almost like we've known each other all our lives. Lots of shared stories, lots of shared family stories. So it's been so special to have these opportunities to connect. We did do that program with the World Affairs Council 2021, and then to have Sepehr, Kamran come tonight and have this conversation that's going to be that blend, exactly what Armen said. It's going to be the academic side, the more political, historical, cultural story, and I'm looking forward to hearing the conversation. Now, one of my jobs here, by the way, thank you, Dick, thank you for supporting me, and we're very proud to be a sponsor of tonight's event. But my job is to actually introduce Mojgan Panah, a dear friend. And I cannot say enough about her energy. And many of you most probably have met her, because that's the type of person that she is. She gets out there, she's in the community, she's involved, and she's done a lot to really create a positive story and narrative around Persian culture in our community. She is a realtor. She works with J.B. Goodwin Realtors, and she's a member of their business development team, the recruiting. She's very convincing, but she's involved, and I'm not going to read all of her biography, but I'm going to tell you that Mojgan also came from Iran, immigrated here to the United States when she was 6 years old. I immigrated when I was much older. I think I was in my late 40s when I immigrated here, and Mojgan, you were 6 when you came here. And she has grown up, she loves San Antonio. San Antonio is her home, and she's gone away. We've done lots of really interesting things in her life. And her family, they're all here, very involved. But she is involved in the Iranian-American community. And she, back in 2018, she co-founded and spearheaded a nonprofit organization referred to, and Armen referenced it, the San Antonio Persian Cultural Society, the Mehr Foundation. And she has been presiding it. I believe that we have some of our board members are here with us tonight. And she's also the president-elect of the Asian-American Alliance of San Antonio, which is an advocacy organization, an umbrella for more than 20 local Asian-American organizations in San Antonio. We have more than 20 organizations, and they're growing, they're always bringing in new organizations, but it's an organization that plays that cohesive role for our community, for Asian-American organizations to be able to have a voice and be heard by our local leaders. So Mojgan has a passion for community, and it stems from her love for Iran. She's committed to supporting other people who share the immigrant journey that she undertook as a child. And beyond her professional achievements and all of her nonprofit work, she's also an author, a co-producer of a film, and she produced a local variety show in San Antonio during the 1990s for the Iranian-American community. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Mojgan to come up and introduce our panelists tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I was trying very hard to hold back my tears while she was talking. I love you, Sherry Shasta Dolashai. Thank you for your friendship and your mentorship. I'm very excited to be here with all of you this evening. So good evening. Welcome to the Center Club. Thank you to the World Affairs Council and Armin Babajanyan and his team. Before I go any further, I do want to ask that you silence your phones, please. If you have not done already, we don't want to interrupt the conversation as we bring up our panel for discussion. I am everything that Sherry said, maybe some other things as well, hopefully good ones. Before I proceed, I want to recognize Vesta Burunanmizani, who's here. Just wave if you don't want to stand up. Vesta is one of our co-founders at Mehr Foundation, and she was very crucial in the founding of our organization and our continued work. And as Sherry said, my whole family is here, well, most of them. And they are volunteers, they participate, and we could not do the work that we do without our family, so thank you. We do have our Persian Fall Festival coming up on November 8th. You have postcards on your chairs, there's some flyers around. You can scan the QR code and follow us. It is a free event that's also sponsored by the Arts and Culture Department of San Antonio, and we're very proud to be hosting our 5th year. With that said, I have been here since I was 6 years old, 1984, so you guys can calculate how old I am now, 47. I've been back to Iran once. That was about 31 years ago. And I pretty much decided I'm not going to go back. Of course, I don't trust the government. And I decided if my dad can't go back to his homeland, I'm not going back to my homeland until he can as well. So for the time being, USA, San Antonio is home, and it's been very good to us. And again, I'm very happy to be here. I would like to welcome now our guest speakers, Dr. Kamran Bokhari and Sepehr Haddad, to join me and take their seats. Please give them a warm, round welcome and applause to San Antonio. Whoever wants to grab whichever chair. As I read their biographies for you, and then I will join them and in conversation. Welcome.
Thank you.
I will start with Dr. Bokhari's biography. Dr. Kamran Bokhari is Senior Director and a key founder of the New Lines Institute for Strategy and Policy. He served as Director of the Institute's Analytical Development Department and played a pivotal role in establishing its MA program in Strategy and Policy, where he also teaches. Dr. Bokhari also teaches a graduate course on Central Asia and Eurasian geopolitics at Georgetown University's Security Studies program and a specialized upper division course on the geopolitics of the Middle East at the University of Delaware. He publishes a weekly essay for geopolitical features and is a regular columnist with Forbes, and brings over 15 years of private sector intelligence experience providing intellectual leadership in publishing cutting-edge geopolitical analysis and strategic forecasts, and has also served as Central Asia Studies course coordinator at the U.S. State Department Foreign Service Institute. That is only half of his biography. Congratulations on all your achievements. Sepehr Haddad, a best-selling and award-winning Iranian-American author and recording artist. He worked for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency for 27 years, studying the effect of pesticides in the food supply. His writing is deeply connected to his family's rich history and Iranian heritage. His debut novel, 100 Sweet Promises, is based on a true family story about his grandfather, a composer who studied music in Russia and fell in love with a Romanov princess. His latest novel, The Harmless Necessary Cat, is a World War II family saga set in Allied-occupied Iran. Beyond his writing, Sepehr is also an accomplished musician and one half of the Billboard chart-topping instrumental guitar duo Shaheen and Sepehr, alongside his childhood friend Shaheen Shahida. Congratulations.
a little insecure.
Let me get mine on. Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Fabulous. So we met briefly about an hour ago before the show, and Sepehr likes to crack jokes. I was a little bit nervous about Dr. Bokhari. I thought he was going to be really serious. And at one point I looked, and they're both standing in the back with a glass of wine in their hands. And I told the bartender, I said, I'm standing here not drinking because I want to make sure I'm a clear hand. And I'm looking back there, and both the panelists are standing there with a glass of wine in their hands. So
Mine was ginger ale.
it was ginger ale. Oh, come on. Well, welcome everyone. I'm going to go ahead and deep dive into conversation with these two gentlemen. But before I do that, I want to ask Dr. Bokhari, can you give the audience a general overview? You might need to turn yours off. There you go. Can you give a general overview of Iran, its population, the language, how many provinces, demographics, who runs the country, just so that our audience knows what we're going to be talking about?
Thank you, Mojgan. It's an honor to be here with Sepehr on the panel. Thank you for the San Antonio World Affairs Council for organizing this, and thank you for everybody for coming. Special thank you to Armin for organizing all of this and leading the effort. So, if you want to think about Iran, can everybody hear?
No. It's off. They turned it off.
I can speak loud.
Yeah, we can both speak loud.
So, if you want to think about Iran, think about Alaska with 93 million people. That's roughly the size of Iran by area. The other thing is that Iran is right smack in the middle of multiple regions. So Iran touches the South Caucasus. Iran actually ruled the South Caucasus for a very long time. Central Asia, South Asia, the Middle East, and the broader Black Sea Basin through Turkey and Armenia. So this is a country that obviously is not just projecting influence historically through the Persianate culture and the Persian language and civilization, but has also been a recipient. The Persian core, which we now call modern-day nation-state of Iran, is a recipient of lots of osmosis. So you have, a little over half the population that can identify as ethnically Persian, but you have a quarter of all 93 million people, roughly, who are Azeri. They are ethnically Azeri, but linguistically, of course, lingua franca is Persian. You have Baloch, which is in the southeast. So Azeris are in the northwest, Baloch in the southeast, near the border with Pakistan and Afghanistan. I was just speaking to a gentleman, he's sitting right here, Mr. Mo Saeed, who's the author of many books, and we were talking about Ahvaz. It's the southwest, and there is a significantly large Arab population. And then, of course, there are others. I mean, there is a large Kurdish population along the border with Iraq and Turkey. But this is the sort of the diversity. I mean, if you have 31 provinces and you have that big of a country, it's very rich. None of this stuff, you have to be a geek like me to actually sort of go into this and sort of say, okay, so what is this country about? Otherwise, you're, reliant on the news, and the news doesn't tell you all this stuff. It tells you the boring stuff.
Wonderful, thank you for that. So you've both been back to Iran much more recently than I have. As I mentioned, I haven't been back in 31 years. I want to take a quick minute, if you can each just give a glimpse into the Iran that you saw through your eyes, and let the audience know as well, when was the year that you visited?
Well, I visited Iran with my family, Moana and my 2 kids. And the reason we really visited wasn't anything more than my son in school being bullied by some kid saying to him after they got into an argument, why don't you just go back to Iran? And my kid came home very upset. And he was like, Dad, they're saying, why don't you go back to Iran? I said, first of all, there's nowhere to run. It's Iran. So no hiding. Second of all, I said, you know what? To Moana, I said, we gotta go. We gotta go. They gotta see this country because their only information they're getting is from the news, and Iran is always the boogeyman and all that stuff. So we went in 2010, a year after the Green Uprising. And it was one of the best trips of my life. Of course, I hadn't been there for 35 years. And of course, Moana, an American, they treated her like royalty. I'm not talking my family. I'm talking the taxi driver, the Hezbollah guy at the airport, all of them treated her, when they would find out she's from the United States. For example, just to give you an example, just a sample of what happened. We would go through airport security. They're very tough and they really check everything. So my sons and I, the men go through one line and the women go through another line. And so we would be in line for like 20 minutes and finally come out, and Moana had already finished a chapter in her book. And I'd say, what happened? How come you didn't take so long? She said, because the lady said, where are you from? And I said, America. And she's okay, just go. Just go through the security. So taxis, the same thing. So my impression of Iran through sanctions and all these kind of things, I was shocked how well it looked like it was doing. Now, my father worked for the Shah. My family is related to the royal family. And so we lost a lot when the revolution, Islamic revolution happened. And I don't call it the Iranian revolution, it's the Islamic revolution. But with all of that, I had to be objective. And when we went there, I was kind of impressed how they're managing it. And so that was my experience.
Very good.
I want to build on that. I had the same impression. When I went in 2011, I was actually invited by the government for a conference. I was just there as an observer. I wasn't going to speak. It's a long story. One day I'm going to write a book about it. But I'm happy to share if anybody has questions. But to answer Mojgan's question, I saw the same thing. I thought that Iran would be like, based on sort of, looking at it from the outside, that it would be like sanctioned North Korea or something like that. But it was more of a South African, thriving under sanctions. I was impressed with the infrastructure. Obviously the regime is problematic, but the people were vibrant people. I had the opportunity one day, I was there for 4 days. 2 days were at the conference, and I got to meet the Supreme Leader. I got to meet then President Haddad, and then the leadership. And the conference had invited sort of the who's who of Iranian allies in the region. I won't go into the details of who was there. You can all figure out who was probably in attendance. And so the third day, my wife said, "Don't come back, home without a carpet." So I told my chaperone that, hey, can you take me to some place? So he took me to Tajrish, which is a nice upscale market in Tehran, and I got a carpet for the business. And so she let me in the house. And so there was that. For the fourth day, I had the opportunity to just sort of be by myself. And I went to cafes and I saw young people. I saw people who were not so young, very vibrant, full of life, and persevering under sort of the system. And so there is the state. The state was not sort of like, if you will, a dilapidated third world country, but a country that's trying to make it while under sanctions. But most importantly were the people who are of no fault. I mean, they didn't choose this regime, but they were thriving, and they found ways to be happy and to make a contribution to the country.
That is amazing. We don't give up. Iranians are tough. We're tough cookies. We've been through a lot, so thank you for that description. Mine is probably pretty much similar, but of course, as I said, it was 31 years ago, and I wanted you to kind of have an idea of what Iran is like today, or at least within the past 5 to 10 years. Dr. Bokhari, since you do have the microphone, we spoke about last week, and you mentioned something to me about, and I have some Arab and Turk friends in here, so don't get mad at me, but Dr. Bokhari mentioned that Arabs and Turks had been Persianized throughout history. I want you to kind of expand on this notion and share some of the positive outcomes, if any, of this Persianization in the region.
So, with the rise of Islam and the Arab conquest of Persia, or at that time the Sassanid Empire in the 7th century, the assumption always is that the conquerors come and they impose their order and their culture, they bring everything. But that's not what happened. What happened was that the Arabs came and they were Persianized because of the high culture. They did give the script, the old Persian script gave way to the Arabic-based script that we now use. But the language, the culture, the civilization was still there. In fact, the Arab Caliphate at the time adopted the Diwan system, which was the governance system of the Sassanids. And they adopted it for better efficiency in running a large empire, because they didn't have any experience in running an empire. And so, Professor Bernard Lewis, the late Professor Bernard Lewis, is the one from whom I learned about sort of how the Persianization, or at least through his work, the Persianization took place, both with the Arabs and the Turks. So by the time you have the Abbasid Empire at its peak in the 8th, 9th century, you have a very thriving Persian culture based out of Baghdad. And it's radiating, and it's essentially, it's not just sort of the Arab Islamic culture that is being transfused across large parts of territory, but also the Persian culture. So you have, as the empire of the Abbasids expanded into Central Asia, and even before the Abbasids, you have Arabs who have adopted the Persian and they take it to the Turkic people, who then come south and become initially part of the military of the Abbasid Empire. And that's how they gain power. So it's a north-south sort of transfusion that you still see. I mean, today, if you go to Bahrain, you will have people with Persian names. If you go to Kuwait, these are Arab countries that have Persian names. And you can go further east to South Asia, and you still see the same thing. I mean, my ancestors left Persia in the 1730s, but I wasn't born in the 1730s. I was born much later. I'm 56, but my name is fully Persian. So you can see how, after centuries, the impact of a civilization that's very dynamic is still thriving.
I'd like to also add something to this. I think it was even before the Arab conquest, time of Alexander of Macedonia, and of course, I don't call him Alexander the Great, because he destroyed Persepolis, destroyed the beautiful library there. I mean, you think if in a drunken, supposedly he was drunk, and one night they got drunk and decided to burn the library of the, in Persepolis. But Alexander respected Darius that had died. And actually, the person that had killed Darius, an Iranian who thought he's going to gain favor with Alexander had him killed and said, no, he was a respectable man. And Alexander actually wanted to be Persian. And so that's the culture of Persia, that even the Greeks at the time that had conquered most of the known world wanted to be Persian. So I'm not saying it out of, being Persian. I mean, it's like it's a historical fact.
I just want to add to that, if you
Go
can
ahead.
allow me. So Alexander is not known as Alexander. That's an anglicized word coming from Europe. The word in the Middle East between the Black Sea all the way to Southeast Asia is Iskandar. Okay, Iskandar is not just a name that's limited to this region. One of the long-range missiles that the Russians still manufacture is called the Iskandar missile.
Wow.
So just to give you an anecdotal piece of evidence on how widespread this Persian culture has radiated.
Can I add something to that? I'm sorry.
Definitely, go
I
ahead.
know you have a lot of questions. So I'm afraid some of them might be that I can't answer.
Go
So.
ahead.
The funny thing about the Persians is, I call it in my first book, 100 Sweet Promises, I call it the Persian paradox. So we Persians are very impressed with powerful, strong people. And at the same time, we hate them if they come and conquer with that same strength and power. So you see it in our culture where we name, and this is amazing to me, where we name our kids Iskandar, Alexander. He conquered Persia, destroyed it. We name them Changiz, Genghis Khan of the Mongols who crushed Iran. We name them Timur, Tamerlane. We name them all these people that came and conquered us. I mean, I don't know why today people still do that, but they do.
I have to say, my name is also Persian, Mojgan, but in Turkish it's Mojgan. And can we once and for all settle it? Rumi, the famous Persian poet, is Persian and not Turkish. Yes, we all agree, everyone, yes? Even my Turkish friends
Half the things you read on the internet are not
true. So, really quick, since we are on the topic of Turkey, and the region, Sepehr, I know you have a fascination with Istanbul just as I do. When I visited, I did notice some of the Persian scripts and the carvings that were still there, not many. What are your thoughts on this Persian influence, and how do we go about preserving this ancient culture of ours that's influenced so much of history?
Yes, I love Istanbul. I think it's one of the most beautiful cities in the world. I didn't expect it to be so wonderful. And yes, you're correct. When you go to museums, you see Persian coins and Persian, bejeweled swords and daggers and things of that nature. And on buildings, you see Persian script and poetry. The thing that I took away from that trip is how sad I was that the country of Iran couldn't be like Turkey today. Because Iran has beautiful geography. I mean, Iran to me is a California 3 times the size of California, but with the diversity of geography. You have mountains and snow, you have desert, you have temperate forests. You have so many things in Iran that tourists would just love to go, besides the, of course, 3,000 years, So today we went to San Antonio and we saw the Alamo. And it's very impressive. The history is very impressive. This city is beautiful. I mean, I think it's one of the most beautiful cities I've seen in the United States, I have to say. But, you're talking about 200-year history. While in Iran, you just go someplace and they put a little stone, a little thing around it, and it's like 7,000 years old. It's mind-boggling. So tourism would flourish if this government would just realize that. And so I wanted it to be more like Turkey, actually.
Yeah.
While in the 70s, people wanted Turkey to be more like Iran.
Very true, very true. I felt exactly the same way when I went. I think it was for the first time as an adult in 2020 or 2021, and I called my dad and I told him, I said, you wouldn't believe what you would see if you were here right now, because the Istanbul that he remembered from the 80s was completely different from what I was seeing at that point. Sepehr, while I am with you, I want to read a quote from your most recent book. It's actually the quote on the very first page, but I want you to really quick touch on the title, The Harmless Necessary Cat. Where is that? Are we talking about Iran?
Yes. So the harmless necessary cat, which is the title of my book, is actually a phrase that Shakespeare used in The Merchant of Venice. So if you're familiar with that, Shylock, who's a moneylender, gets into trouble, and he's now trying to defend himself when they catch him. And he says, you know, why are you worried about me? I help the economy. I'm almost like that harmless, necessary cat that catches the mice and is sitting over there. He has nothing to do with anything. So when I was doing the research for this book, I noticed that in 1907, the Russians and the British had decided to separate Iran into two zones of influence, spheres of influence, with the middle zone that was supposedly neutral. And the Punch magazine in England had done a cartoon and had called it The Harmless Necessary Cat, where the Russian bear is holding the head of the cat, because the head of Iran is towards Russia, and the tail of the cat, where the British were controlling, is held by a British lion. And the cat itself is in the middle, kind of freaked out. And the English lion says to the Russian bear, he says, look, I'll caress his tail, you caress his head, and we can both caress his back. And the Persian cat's all freaked out, you know, his eyes like this, and he's going, nobody ever consulted me about this. And so I decided to write this story, The Harmless Necessary Cat, and it's basically symbolizing Iran. Harmless because it had no way to defend itself against these foreign interventionists, and necessary because in World War II, Iran was considered the bridge to victory and the Persian corridor, where material would go from the Persian Gulf through the railway to Russia to help the Russians fight the Germans.
Very good, thank you. And I encourage all of you to pick up a copy of the book when you leave. So let me read this quote really quick. It is the very front page, and it's a quote by, I hope I say this right, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, that's Russian. And he writes, the line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties, but right through every human heart. This line shifts inside us, it oscillates with the years, and even within hearts overwhelmed by evil, one small bridgehead of good is retained, and even in the best of all hearts, there remains an unuprooted small corner of evil. So I found it very profound, a very correct depiction and definition of humanity, right? We often celebrate the protagonists, as we just talked about with Alexander, without acknowledging their mishaps and the evil in them. And we overlook certain things just because it doesn't benefit our ideologies. So, you know, the first thing that came to my mind was, when I was putting this together, was the Romans and the annihilation of Carthage. Alexander, the Crusades, Napoleon, even our own King Cyrus the Great, whom I'm a huge fan of, right? Marched into many battles, killed many thousands of people, and then freed Babylon. So, Kamran, you did mention your ancestors left Iran or Persia in the 1730s. Sepehr, you write of famine, disease, and death, and the weeds or the roots of hatred towards the West for Iranians. I want both of you to talk to me a little bit about how we mend society after atrocities and keep culture alive, and of course, how your own families have been affected throughout history. Come, Dr. Bokhari, go ahead. And if we can hold the mics up, I was told that we're not sorry about the sound system.
No worries. So I got interested because there are only so many graves in my father's village, and they only go back so far. And I said, so where are the rest? And he said, well, they're scattered all over. And that got me thinking that, you know, so where did we come from? And so then I got a hold of what in Persian and other languages in the region is called shajra, you know, the family tree. And lo and behold, in that there is an annotation by someone who created, I don't know who created the family tree, that the person who came to South Asia, to Kashmir, in the 1730s, came from a place called Mulk Iran. Mulk is like land, country, nation. You can interpret it in different ways. And so I looked up and I said, okay, you know, what was happening in the at that time. So I said, okay, every generation is roughly 20 years, lifespan, and people got married earlier back then. So I just did a rough math, and I said, okay, because there are no dates there, and so in the document. And so I said, okay, so you probably left around roughly somewhere around the 1730s, give or take. And I said, okay, so what was happening? So this is right after the Safavids had fallen, the large, Iranian Persian Empire of the 16th century, and there was a family of a dynasty called the Afsharids that were ruling not just modern-day Iran, but the South Caucasus, parts of the North Caucasus, Central Asia, South Asia, and parts of the Middle East. And so, so that's the time period they came to Kashmir. And I also said, okay, so what else was happening during that time period? So around that time, the Russians had already started the conquest of what we now call Kazakhstan. And so I said, okay, so maybe they were trying to escape, imminent conquest or whatever, because so my family name is Bokhari, which basically says from Bukhara, which is in Uzbekistan. But in that time period, there's nothing called Uzbekistan. It's called the Emirate of Bukhara, which was a vassal state of the Afsharids, and before that, the Safavids. And so they left that area because they were more closer to the north than what we think of Iran in the present day. And so they left to Kashmir, and I joke, I said, okay, so maybe you left because the Russians were coming, but by the time you got to Kashmir, you ran into the Brits. So, you left one sort of you escaped one colonialism for another. And we have family members, relatives who are from cities like Gilan, Sabzabad. Their last names are of Iranian cities that exist till this day. And then you can see, now we do DNA tests, so I got my DNA test done. So it turns out 35% is West Asian, which means Iranian.
Have you been back to visit at any point?
To
Bokhara?
Yes, I went to Uzbekistan in 2022. Okay. And so it's fascinating, the connectivity, just human connectivity. I'm not talking about internet and modern connectivity. It's just the human connectivity through the ages between the Turkic people who still inhabit that part of the world, with the Persianate people and the South Asians and the Turkic people. I just want to stop with one thought here, is that the Safavids are known as a Persian empire, but Shah Ismail, who founded the Safavid Empire in 1501, was an Azeri-Turkic origin. So he was linguistically Persian. So you had a Turkic empire that imbibed the Persian culture and then ruled Persia and defined Persia. And you have the same thing happening in British India under the Mughal Empire. Another Turkic dynasty that found its way, was able to communicate with the local people of India through the Persian language. And that's how sort of they connected, and it became sort of Indo-Persian.
Sepehr, do you want to add on that and then expand on the roots of Iranian hatred towards the West?
Yeah, well, I was going to say that, even though Cyrus the Great, our great king, did probably kill a lot of people in his conquest, but in the Bible, he's considered the Messiah. So history is written by the victors.
Yes.
And so, yes, a lot of people do die in these wars and so forth, but then people got freed, so it's hard to put it on a balance and say, is it right or wrong? There were people that were in exile, that had been, away from their homeland, and then Cyrus the Great allowed them to go back, and then the Persians allowed them to build the second temple and all that. So, in terms of, I wouldn't say hatred towards the West, I would say distrust. I don't think Iranians hate the West, and we are a prime example, Juan and I, when we went to Iran, how much the people loved America and Americans. And they taxi drivers would say, when they find out Moana's Iranian-American, they would say, please tell her that we love America. You know, everybody wanted to be an ambassador to have a friendship with America. So they don't have a hatred with America at all. It's the ruling government, but not the people. The people are us, as Mojgan and Shahrazad, myself, and Dr. Bokhari. There is this, you know, and I've mentioned this in other interviews, where people think that the animus towards the West happened after the 1953 Mossadegh, you know, the Prime Minister of Iran, who was democratically elected, you know, was overthrown by the British and Americans, and then the Shah came back. Some people debate whether or not that was the case, but I mean, this is what people, you talk to people, they say, oh yeah, Mossadegh, that's from when the Iranian people distrusted the US. I disagree with that. My theory, it's not a theory, but it's an idea, is that that was 1953. In 1941, where I write about it in my book, The Harmless Necessary Cat, you know, Iran was invaded, a neutral country. Iran had declared neutrality in World War II, and Iran was invaded by the British and the Russians, and occupied for 6 years. So from 1941 to 1946. And even in 46, they had to kind of get the Russians out. That was the first case of the Cold War, where the United States and the United Nations helped get Russia out, because Russia wanted to stay and take over those northern Ostans, we call them, northern states of Iran, provinces. And I think that in 53, you just got your prime minister out by foreign powers. That's a bad thing. But in 41, you got occupied. 6 years. Millions died. I mean, this is something that they don't know. Millions in Iran died in World War II as a neutral country, because the Russians took the harvest of those years and sent the food up to the Russian soldiers fighting the German war machine. And the British mismanaged the harvest in the south. They didn't have good water planning and so forth. So any food that was left was sent away. So the people were starving, and the diseases that come from starvation. And the king, Reza Shah, at the time, that many considered an autocrat, but he rebuilt, I mean, he made Iran, if you look at Iran before Reza Shah and after Reza Shah, the difference is amazing. I mean, the country just really was trying to industrialize, of course with German help. But I think that that's more of a reason for animus towards, you know, it's not like 1700. It was just 11 years before Mossadegh. So.
Well, you have the microphone in your hand. In 1943, talk to me, what was significant about the Tehran conference, where the big three, we all know that famous photo, right? Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt are sitting in their chairs on top of the porch. What was significant about the Tehran conference during that time? Maybe you can expand.
Well, the Tehran conference was important because, as you mentioned, Roosevelt, Stalin, and Churchill, they wanted to meet. Stalin was afraid to fly, and he didn't want to be too far away from Russia. So they decided that they're going to have a train take him from Baku to Tehran. And in Tehran, he was, of course, in the Russian embassy. Roosevelt was going to stay at the American embassy, but he stayed in the Russian embassy because there was talk that the Germans had a plan to assassinate the big three. And the plan was to assassinate them on November 30th, because the Tehran conference happened November 28th, 1943. The plan was to assassinate them on Churchill's birthday on November 30th. And they had this whole plan. And I was lucky enough to be able to get some documents that had been through the I don't know, they have the same thing in Russia, but the FO, Freedom of Information Act, where you can get, documents after a certain amount of years. And I read some of the, what was going on. And one of the funny things, if you don't mind, I'll say a little anecdote, that happens there is that, so the British embassy was on, and the Russian embassy were very close to each other in downtown Tehran. You remember there was a Churchill Street and there was a Roosevelt Street, so we had streets named for each one of these people. But because there was this thought that the Germans might want to, assassinate the big three, Stalin had asked Roosevelt to stay in the Russian embassy. And there was a tunnel underneath the British and the Russian embassy. So when they met, that's how they got together. And at one of these meetings, and I read this in one of these, as I said, Freedom of Information Act things in the Russians, and they made a movie about it, Tehran 1943, where they're sitting at a table, and now these are the people that are deciding the D-Day at the 1943 conference. They were deciding how to go about doing D-Day and attack Europe and take it from the Germans. And Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill were sitting at this meeting, and Stalin notices that Roosevelt wrote something on a note and passed it to Churchill. And Churchill looks at it and laughed and wrote something else. Stalin was very envious and jealous of this friendship between the two of them. And he asks his head of security, a man named Alliance, at the time, to find out what they were talking about. And he says, I don't want you to tell me what they were talking about. I want you to find me that note. So they go find in the trash cans, because it was in the Russian embassy, and they pick it out. And in the trash can, Roosevelt had written to to Churchill. He said, it's a little risque, but I'll say it.
Go ahead.
He says, sir, your fly is undone. And Churchill writes back on that note that says, he says, no worries, the old eagle will not fall out of its nest. So these three were trying to take over the world, but then there was still this little bit of an intrigue between them all. And so that was a funny little story. I did not read the book.
You found the note and you read what was on there?
Yeah, that's what they
That is so funny. Are there any other stories, anything else that's kind of lesser known that you discovered?
There are many, but
They're all rated R. We'll keep them for later.
I need to know the age limit.
Dr. Bokhari, while we're on the topic of war, shift a little bit. How did World War II and the early Cold War shape U.S.-Iran relations starting from 41 to 79, and what long-term effects did these events have on trust and cooperation between the two countries?
So that's a great question because well before the end of World War II, it was very clear to the West, to the United States and Britain, to both FDR and Churchill, that in order to defeat the Third Reich, we will have to do business with Stalin. And Stalin was not sort of like a preferred ally, but it was an ally of necessity. And if you go back to the sort of the details of that time period, you'll find out that they knew that Eastern Europe would fall under Soviet control even before it had happened. Because that's what happened. If you are pushing eastwards from the West towards Germany, Third Reich, and you have the Soviets from the other side doing a pincer movement, but at some point, if they're defeated, then both forces will gain territory. And so, in other words, the Cold War that was, there's sort of not a fine line between the end of World War II and the beginning of the Cold War. The Cold War was locked into place because it's an unintended consequence of how World War II ended. Simply put, we had to deal with one monster to destroy another one. And what happened in the case of Iran was Iran stood on the containment line. The containment line to contain the Soviet Union ran from Greece through Turkey, through Iran, through Pakistan, through Afghanistan, all the way to India. India was technically formally non-aligned, but it was pro-Soviet and everybody knew it. And so these were the allies. And then you had the Soviet penetration of the Middle East, where countries like Egypt, Libya, Iraq, Syria were Soviet satellite states. So you had an alliance between Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Israel and Turkey as the anchor of the United States to contain the Soviet Union. And so in many ways, Iran was pivotal until 1979. 1979 is a very fascinating year because in 1979 you have three major events. In February, you have the overthrow of the Shah. And unfortunately, the United States government was sleeping on the job and could not predict the fall of the Shah. And there's, now we know why. We can get into the details, but that was an intelligence failure on the part of the United States government. That happens in February of 1979. In November, you have the seizure of the Grand Mosque in Mecca by radical Salafi militants who were nominally or formally aligned with the Saudi kingdom, but they thought that this Saudi kingdom had become corrupted and they sought to overthrow it. That was put down, that's in November. And in December, you have the Soviet Union crossing the containment line, not into Iran, but Afghanistan. And you have the Soviet takeover of Afghanistan. So from a US point of view, Iran is lost to hostile forces in the month of February, and by the end of the year, you don't know what's going to be the future of Saudi Arabia, and you have Soviet troops south of the containment line, and then Operation Cyclone, and I'm sure you've seen Charlie Wilson's War, and the rest is history. But that was, during that time period, from the end of World War II till 1979, Iran was an ally of the United States, a very key ally because of strategic reasons. Again, a country that right smack in the middle, on the border, on the front line of the Cold War. And if Iran were to fall, the big question was, okay, Saudi next. And so this was the Cold War calculus.
Sorry, can you guys hear me with this? Okay, perfect. So with that said, when we think about today, what are the three most current issues surrounding the U.S.-Iran relations?
I think it's too much history has gone by. I think we're approaching 50 years. This is the 46th year of the cessation of relations, normal relations between Iran and the United States, and decades of hostility and whatnot. But I think that we're at a moment now where Iran's geopolitical ambitions have fallen on their face in the wake of what has happened over the past 1 year. From the destruction of the capabilities of Hezbollah, the destruction of Hamas's capabilities, the fall of the Assad regime. These are all allies of the Islamic Republic. And to the Israeli attack on Iran and the weakening of the Iranian regime. The supreme leader is 86 years old, and he was already on his way out. Now I'm hearing from sources that the regime is trying to front load the succession to a new supreme leader and not wait for the old man to die, because that leaves a lot of uncertainty. And then the end of the nuclear program in the month of June. I think all of these things together have created an opportunity for the United States and Iran to limp back towards some semblance of a relationship. I don't want to call it normalcy. I think that that's too premature, but I think that this regime has run its course. I'm not saying it will fall. I'm saying it will evolve in slow motion, but I think that they've run out of options and they have no choice. And especially with the United States adopting a new strategy. One of the things, if you allow me a minute.
That was my next question, the strategy for the U.S. and then what that shift in behavior for Iran looks like.
So, okay, great. So After World War II, the United States constructed a massive architecture, which includes the UN, the IMF, the World Bank, the Department of Defense, the Department of State, USAID, and everything. The idea was that we don't want to have another world war. And Europe was devastated, Asia was devastated. European colonial powers had been weakened that led to the independence of many countries, and new countries emerged on the map. So the United States came up with this elaborate system, which we think of in terms of the Marshall Plan for Germany and Europe, and the recovery and reconstruction development in Japan. But this system was never meant for sort of all eternity to come. It's run its course. So what you are seeing right now is a new geostrategy emerging from the Trump White House, and it's very haphazard because that's the nature of it. These things, when we read in history, they look very methodical, but at the time when they're being put in place, we make things up, and this is the human condition, as we go along. So what we now have is a strategy that says every region, its stakeholders, US allied and partner nations, will take the lead for security of their regions, and the United States will not do the heavy lifting. That's the broadest sort of sentence strategy. The details are still being worked out. What does that mean for Iran? Iran is one of 4 countries in the Middle East, and we can talk about Central Asia, South Caucasus, and South Asia as well. But suffice to say, for the Middle East, there are 4 countries: Iran, Turkey, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. Somehow they have to achieve a balance of power, which is what the United States wants. So if the president went to the Israeli parliament and said, I'm going to have a deal with Iran, he's not joking. There's something that is afoot. He's not sharing the details because obviously he, doesn't know himself where this is going, and is still being worked, and it may not work, so why should you say in advance? And so and then the this reset between the US and Iran has to also take place. So with Israel, with Turkey, with Saudi, you already have a relationship. With Iran, you do not, and you need to have a relationship. And we can get into sort of the details of what will happen domestically that will help that relationship, but I think I'll stop right here.
Very good. Thank you so much. Well, we're on the topic of behavior change. Sepehr, what do you make of these images coming out of Iran? We see them on social media, right? The fancy coffee shop scenes, girls without their hijab at public concerts, the island of Quiche, which is just fluttering with fabulous cafes. I wish I was there on a daily basis, right? And fancy auto dealerships, cars on the streets. So are Iranians compromising? Are they literally living their best life? Are we not getting the full image? What do you make of all this?
Before I answer that, can I continue?
Please, please.
So one thing I think in the 70s people were worried about in Iran and the US government was communism, was the communism. And so what happened is that's why when Afghanistan fell, the US was supplying Stinger missiles to bin Laden, to people like that. So a lot of this ISIS and these type of groups that came out were fighting the jihad that they considered against communism. And I think that's one of the reasons also that unfortunately we had the revolution in Iran. Because at the time, the Shah wasn't allowing a lot of democratic or at least public discussion. And so he was very anti-communist, which I liked, but the focus was only on communism. And he was allowing the mosques to actually, they were giving them money and helping them and all that. And a lot of the stuff happened in the mosque system in Iran, where the government really couldn't go. I mean, they had agents that would go and listen and report back. But Khomeini started sending tapes in 1978 when he was in France to Iran, and they would distribute it through the social media of the time, which was the mosque system, because there was no internet or anything. So that's one thing. Another thing is that, so to answer your question, I'm saying forget even the people that go to cafes and stuff. Talk about the Revolutionary Guards. So we're going in the airport, coming home from Iran. Usually the flights from Iran are 3, 4 in the morning. It's exhausting. You go to the airport hours earlier, get your passport and all that. So we had our little kids, and the kids were running around, and I was trying to keep them quiet. And I was just so frustrated that the guy, and we had taken KLM to Holland and then Holland to Tehran. And so when they say where you're going, you usually would say Holland, they didn't want to say America. But I was so frustrated with these kids, and the guy said, and he was like a really, bearded, the Hezbollah sign behind him, all this kind of stuff. And he's like, where are you going? And I said, where are we going? He said, I'm going to America. And he goes, you're going to America? I said, yeah. He said, lucky you. He said that to me. So forget the people in the cafe. There are people that are in that level that are not excited about what's going on.
Can I add to that?
Really quickly, I believe they're telling me we're running out of time, but I've got tons of questions to ask.
So I just want to add to what Sepehr has just said about the Revolutionary Guards. So for many years, there are guards who have been arguing that why is it that we are under sanctions while countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar are exporting gas and oil like there is no tomorrow? So why are we under sanctions? So this is not something, we get this view that the guards are a monolith. They're not a monolith. I just want to add to that.
Thank you. Guys, I know we're running out of time, but I'm going to go through a couple of more questions really quick before we open it up to Q&A. Let me go back really quick. So we had the death of Mahsa Amini that sparks protests and uprising throughout the world, and the slogan "Women like freedom" or "Zan Zindagi Azadi" took over social media and our lives. We witnessed unity, we witnessed division, we witnessed propaganda, individuals who were among us who we had no idea existed and had ties to the Islamic regime here in the States. With all of this said, Dr. Bokhari, I want you to really quickly tell me how advanced is the intelligence agencies of Iran? How advanced are they, and how far is their reach? And then Sepehr, while he's answering that, if you can think, how can we continue to raise global awareness of the issue facing Iranians within Iran?
So very quickly, 2 points. As far as domestic security is concerned, there's nobody else. The Iranian intelligence community is very effective. They have a number of organizations that are competing with each other for resources and whatnot. So if there is a threat to Iranian intelligence, as far as domestic security is concerned, is in each other. They're competing with one another. But when it comes to protection from threats from the outside, they're very bad, as was very clearly evident in the way the Israelis came in and struck. And this isn't something that happened this year. In fact, when the nuclear scientist Mohsen Fakhrizadeh was assassinated in November of 2020, I wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal saying that Israel has penetrated Iran's intelligence network. So it just depends. If you're thinking of them as a domestic police force, yeah, they control a lot of things. But can they really protect the country from the outside? No.
So the drones and what we saw with the bombings in June, that was the extent of their strength, or do they have more military power than what we see? Was that just kind of all for show?
No, it's not all for show. It's that it's a scale is different. I mean, you are sending unguided ammunition or ordnance that may hit the target, may not hit the target, as opposed to precision strikes where you have the top leadership of the IRGC eliminated within the first few hours of the bombing campaign from Israel. So that's a world of difference in terms of capabilities.
Regarding the Mahsa Amini thing, I wrote something in this Harmless Necessary Cat in 1936. Reza Shah had this edict called Kashf Hijab, which meant that women should take off the hijab, and they couldn't go in the street with the hijab. And if they did, a lot of times they would pull it off and actually beat the women for wearing the hijab. And you have 100 years later, the Mahsa Amini time, where they're now beating women for not wearing the hijab. I mean, it's just, that was one thing that hit me when I was doing this research, that, you know, how is it that men get to decide when women, what can women wear? The same piece of clothing 100 years before you get beat if you're wearing it, 100 years later you get beat if you're not wearing it. What kind of world is this? And it really bothered me to see that, and see that, you know, where men, you know, this, of course, Iran is a very male-dominated society, no doubt about it. However, women make up the most educated between men and women. Women are more educated in universities and colleges and so forth than the men are. So that's changing. So the women are taking control now and you know, showing their power.
Absolutely, thank you. Dr. Bokhari, really quick, Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian military officer, was assassinated in 2020 under the first Trump administration. You mentioned in a presentation that there are rumors his successor is still alive and works for the Israelis. We recently saw in Israel an image of President Trump with the headline Cyrus the Great above it, as a reference to the freedom that was granted to the Jews in Babylon by the Persian king. In my opinion, it's heavy propaganda. What are your thoughts on all of this? And sorry, I'm reading these very quickly.
So, very quickly on, so Qasem Soleimani's successor is Ismail Qani. And it's interesting that he's the head of the Quds force that was sort of the point organization within the Iranian regime that dealt with the Hezbollahs, the Hamases, the Houthis, and whatnot. And everybody else gets killed, and he doesn't get killed. So I think he was probably just lucky. But there is a rumor inside Iran, inside the regime, that everybody else got killed by, he's even working for the Israelis. So this is a rumor within the regime and its ecosystem that, you know, how did you survive and not anybody else? And so that's where that remark came from. Your other point was?
Trump's image with the name Cyrus the Great above it.
So it's interesting that, you know, this is something that is symbolic. It is propaganda, you're right. It's more, propaganda is sort of an old word. I now use the word information operations. So this is info ops. And so, but I want to point out that when I followed Ahmadinejad's time very closely. So Ahmadinejad, for all his radicalism and whatnot, he ran foul of the clergy. And in the end, you know, he ended up fighting with the supreme leader because he and his comrades were saying things like we should celebrate Cyrus the Great because these people were very strange. They were ideologically Islamist, but they were also Iranian nationalists, and they had this sort of sense of imperial history that they sort of wanted to lay claim to. So it's not just Trump, it's members of this regime who, all things being equal, want to celebrate Cyrus the Great.
Sepehr, many Iranians were quick to support Israel because of their hatred for the Iranian regime. This was one of the topics that we had talked about, and there is something on the epilogue in your book about in regards to this. But the hatred for the Iranian regime and its ties to Hamas, and also associating Israel with monarchy and again Cyrus the Great, and thinking that an end to Hamas meant an end to the Islamic Republic of Iran. We have yet to see that happen. My last question for you is that hatred comes from a place of pain, and we see it in many cultures. How can Iranians progress and move forward if they're still holding on to pain from the past, and where do you see Iran in the next 10 years?
Well, I mean, that's
Fully loaded
better question for Dr. Bokhari. But I think the way one always goes through pain to the future is by acknowledging the pain. And a lot of the pain has not been acknowledged. You know, a lot of the things that has happened to Iran has not been acknowledged. That's why I wrote this book. Because many people don't know that millions died in Iran during World War II. And that Iran was neutral. Iran, yes, it was pro-German. And, you know, I've done other interviews and people say, so you're saying Iran was pro-Nazi? I'm saying, no, not Nazi, pro-German. Because the Germans were building our telecommunications, our infrastructure, and all of that. And they needed a counterbalance to the Russians and British who had invaded them and occupied them. So, you know, acknowledgement helps a lot. If people can acknowledge that, yes, this harm happened and whatever happened, and you can then move forward. So that's
Thank you. Dr. Bokhari, where do you see Iran in the next 10 years?
Broad strokes, one can't be too specific about it. I think we're at the tail end of the theocracy. The theocracy is shot. The clergy have already lost power. I think this is going to be a military-dominated state, but not dominated by the IRGC, but by the regular armed forces, the Ardish. The regular armed forces date back to the Safavids. So they're not just the Shah's army, but they were the Qajar army as well, and the dynasties before. Unlike the IRGC, they are not, they're very, well, they're not Western secular, but they are secular in the Iranian context. And they're more professional, less ideological. And if you notice, after the war with Israel, they have gained the upper hand in terms of the number of seats they control in the National Security Council. And they're calling the shots. So I see the next supreme leader will be a puppet in the hands of the military. I'm already hearing that one of the first things that the military wants is to end this thing of suppressing women. So the next supreme leader, if all things go well as planned, one of the first announcements would be that, you know, let's not worry about what women wear. So normalizing that non-hijab culture that we're already seeing. And number two, we don't need to be friends with the United States, but we need to work with the United States for the improvement of the Iranian economy. So those are the two things that will consume the better part of the
That's
next
all good
5 years.
news.
If all things go well.
If all things
Yeah,
go
if all
well.
things go well.
Hopefully there's no supreme leader at all.
Yeah.
If all things go
And in
well.
fact, there may not be a new
That's-
supreme leader, because there could be now, you're hearing, you know, I'm at least hearing that there is the idea of a leadership council that will be temporary. And so it would sort of be in the interregnum between phasing out supreme leadership and whatever comes next.
Very good. I'm going to end on a lighter note. Just for fun, Persia or Iran? Which one do you use?
I like Persia.
Persia. Okay. I won't ask why. Persia or Iran?
So Iran has always called itself Iran. We never called ourselves Persia. Persia, Pars or Fars, is that region in where Shiraz, Persepolis is. You know, in 1935, Reza Shah asked foreign countries to not call us Persia anymore, but to call us Iran. Now, when the hostage crisis happened, I was Persian because I say Iran and I'm going to, you know, it's exotic. Persian cat, Persian rug, Persian, it's beautiful. That's that shit sound, and then you think it's made in France or something. But Iran was always Iran, and to Iranians at least. I mean, we never called them when we were kids in Iran. We never said Parsia. We said Iran. And so Irani. So the Churchill is at fault here, in my opinion, because Churchill didn't want Iran and Iraq to be, you know, people to mistake them. So he wanted to keep calling Iran Persia rather than, because they were in Iran and Iraq and they're so close.
Right.
So I'm in Iran.
You're in Iran, yes. We are in Iran.
But if there's a hostage crisis,
You're Persian. Very good, very good. But I know we kind of lost a little time and we weren't able to get to all of our questions, but I hope that you enjoyed the conversation. And I highly recommend that you pick up a copy of Sepehr's books and follow Dr. Bokhari, find his videos on YouTube. I watched a video presentation that he has shared with me, and I was just blown away by the amount of knowledge that he has about Iran and the region. Am I passing it over to you, my friend Armin Babajanian, who is also of Iranian descent? Please give another big round of applause.
Well, let's hear it for the moderator, Mojgan. Sepehr, Dr. Bokhari, thank you both for being here very much. one or two questions, but very brief ones. But they're also going to stay afterwards, correct? And are you okay signing books?
Oh, yes, yes.
So after we're all done, Sepehr will be in that corner signing books. Twig Bookstore is here selling both of his books. So hang tight for that. Yes, sir.
Hi. My wife and I were in Iran in 2014. Royally treated. My question is, there was a book recently published this year entitled King of Kings. I highly recommend it to anyone who wants to read a very detailed explanation of what happened in the Islamic Revolution. My question is, in reading that book, what could the United States have done in order to have assisted the Shah avoid that, or was it unavoidable?
That's yours.
Sounds like an easy question.
I think we were so consumed by the Cold War that we did not see sort of the constituent parts of that architecture. And one of the mistakes that we made is not knowing in advance. So one of the things that, and of course Hollywood has popularized it in a different way, but the Truman administration established the Central Intelligence Agency to be the eyes and the ears of the President of the United States. It was not meant to be espionage-heavy directorate of operations heavy. It was meant to be directorate of analysis heavy. Unfortunately, the Cold War sort of swept with that, and we were not able to get it. So who were our people talking to? People who spoke English. Okay? People who we could relate to. We didn't have a whole lot of Persian experts. And, what were they going to tell you? They were not going to tell you what was going on. If we were talking to people who were in government, is a minister or a bureaucrat in one of the ministries going to tell you this regime is going to be overthrown? No, that's not in their interest. So we did not have the intelligence of what was going on. And we were overwhelmed by the containment of the Soviet Union, and really we were thrown off guard. So I think had we had better intelligence, had we had better capabilities, we spoke to people not just in Tehran and amongst the elite, we spoke to people across the country, we probably would have had a better sort of idea that this regime is not going to survive, and well ahead of time when something could possibly have been done to avoid this outcome.
This may be Tim's last question for World Affairs Council this year, so Tim.
Thank you. Dr. Bokhari, I just wanted to ask you a question based on some of your last statements regarding the end of theocracy. And this has to do with basically where you see the region going vis-a-vis great power competition. As you said, and my boss, Secretary Rubio, says we're always looking for allies and partners to advance U.S. interests. That hasn't changed ever since World War II, and that will be continuing. However, point taken, that realism and a realist approach to the region is probably in our future. So I want to ask a question for the other great powers. We're seeing Russia recede. Only 3-4 years ago, they were launching military strikes from Iranian soil. But now, given everything else going on in the world, they're receding. How do you see China playing in the region with vis-a-vis Iran, and what will they bring to the region, and what should we be concerned with from the international level? Thank you.
So that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. We have to understand that, see, the way in which we frame sort of great power competition is largely sort of military. And we try to think in those terms. With China, it's geoeconomic. And that's the part we're not getting. Geotech. I wrote a piece for Forbes recently, which I said, the title was Commerce versus Confrontation, the U.S.-China conundrum. Basically, the Chinese, as that Russian footprint is receding from Central Asia, the northern flank of Iran, you have the Chinese spreading their network. They're heaviest investors. They're building the transportation networks. The Trump route is, I would just say, thank God that we're getting involved in the South Caucasus, because otherwise, that BRI was going to extend past the Caspian and go into the South Caucasus, and we would have been late to the game. So, but we're still very much west of the Caspian. So I think that China is going to play a geoeconomic role. But the problem that the Chinese have is that they rely on others to take care of security in order to go invest. So if you notice, BRI happened when the US was managing Afghanistan, making sure we didn't do a great job, but at least we were keeping everything that happened in Afghanistan within Afghanistan, which is why they launched the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor and the BRI through Kazakhstan. And if you notice, 5 months before the Taliban took over and we left, the Chinese foreign minister was standing next to his Iranian counterpart in Tehran, announcing a 25-year deal for a $400 billion project to extend the BRI from Central Asia through the entire length of Iran to connect it with the Persian Gulf. I think this is what we need to worry about. Not that it's going to become a military force. It does not have the capability. The Chinese have never deployed multi-divisional force beyond their borders. But what they are doing is they can drop a lot. Part of it has to do with their political economic system. For us, it has to make business sense. Companies need to invest in order to get a profit. For them, they can just write a check because the government is doing so. So they have that advantage. That's something we need to somehow work around. And that is going to be our biggest challenge. I think that they're going to, I don't know to what extent they will jump into the Middle East, but I think that the northern flank of the Middle East, they have an advantage. The geoeconomic and geotech advantage. I mean, now EVs, they're the ones running the show. They're very competitive now, even in AI. The question is not who makes the next best AI application, who's going to deploy it at scale.
On that note, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to the Mehr Foundation, to our moderator. Scan our QR code here for future events. There's also abilities to sign up for events in the back, as well as make a gift. Thank you to Sepehr and thank you to Dr. Bokhari. Thank you all so much. We'll see you next time.